So corporate media, to my shock, is outraged by Pelosi defending her insider trading and corruption. Take a look at this clip.
Members of Congress and their spouses be banned from trading individual stocks while serving in Congress.
No, I don't know to the second one. This is a free market and people, we have a free market economy. They should be able to participate in that.
I got to talk about this and bring in Andrew Ross Sorkin, co-anchor of Squawk Box and founder of the New York Times Deal Book. Andrew, you got to walk me through this. When you're the CEO of a publicly traded company, there are all sorts of restrictions on what you can do. When you work in an investment bank, when you work as an investor, so many restrictions when it comes to personal investments. But these people, lawmakers, these are policymakers, policies that directly influence the way business is done all over the country. How is this even remotely legal?
This was one of the most disappointing and maybe, to put it even less politely, disgraceful comments and views I have heard espoused on this issue, and surprising given Pelosi's views on many other issues. We have insider trading laws for a reason. CEOs, executives cannot trade. Members of the Federal Reserve now cannot trade. And yet we are allowing our politicians who do have access to inside information. They are often briefed regularly about all sorts of things that are about to happen and that they have a meaningful influence on what is about to happen, and they are trading. To the extent that politicians should want the public to trust them, this undermines every bit of trust. It goes to every worst expectation of corruption. And it's not even expectation, it's real.
This isn't about free markets. This is about having privileged information and using it to your own personal advantage. But let's talk about, even if you agree that the current laws make sense, that you should be able to buy and sell stock, the penalties are a joke. You can make tens of millions of dollars with privileged information. And what's going to happen? You're going to get fined $200.
Nothing.
Wow. That is surprising. That is surprising. MSNBC going after Nancy Pelosi. That's how much she crossed the line here. They brought up an interesting point. You know, the Fed had a scandal recently about trading stocks, and then they immediately banned trading stocks. Shock, right? Apparently CEOs have rules as well. I actually was unaware of that. So what's happening here is they're like, look, other elites have rules and regulations that are more stringent. So this is like spitting in our face. What Nancy Pelosi said here. That's all correct. That's all correct. I mean, I would ban them today from owning stocks. I would ban the revolving door. If you're going to be a public servant, you can only be a public servant. You can't then cash in as a lobbyist or whatever afterwards. You can't serve Big Pharma and then when you leave D.C., go get paid $1 million from Big Pharma to be an advisor or whatever. Nope. If you're a public servant, you're a public servant. That's it. Because clearly you have conflicts of interest, you have corruption, and then you have politicians that only serve the interests of industry over constituents. But I will go one step further here. And this is where these people lose the plot. This is a very clear kind of personal conflict of interest and corruption. But in corporate media, they have absolutely nothing to say about the more pervasive form of corruption in D.C. Campaign contributions. Because, I mean, don't take my word for it. Go look at the numbers. You have Wall Street, Big Pharma, the health insurance companies, the defense contractors. When a politician, a Republican politician or a Democratic politician runs for office, the corporate wing of the party, they raise almost all of their money from industry, almost all of it. It's very rare that you get any politician on the right or the left that does grassroots fundraising. So they raise money from corporate PACs. The party institutions themselves also raise money from these special interest groups. And that is exactly why we have the debates that we have in Washington, D.C., and it's just tiny little tweaks around the edges. And even if you have a bold proposal, it gets whittled down to 20% of what it was previously. That is all because of the influence of big money. So in other words, they're not having honest ideological disagreements about the direction of the country. They're having disagreements over serving their particular donor set. And so that's why really popular ideas just get stripped, whether it's Medicare expansion, childcare, universal pre-K, elder care, like all these things just get watered down or totally axed because they're not serving the people. If they were serving the people, all these things would already be law. We'd already have universal health care. We'd already have universal background checks on gun purchases. We'd already have free college. We'd already have a $15 minimum wage or higher. If the government actually represented the people, that would be the case. But they don't represent the people. They're representing industry. Look, I use this example all the time, but in the 2020 election in Florida, Donald Trump beat Joe Biden, but also raising the minimum wage won with 60% of the vote. That means a lot of Republicans, average Joe and Jane Republicans, went and voted for Trump and then also voted to raise the minimum wage. How can that be? Well, it's very simple. The population is actually way more economically left than any of the politicians are. Because the average Joe and Jane are not bought off by Walmart and Pfizer and ExxonMobil and all these different companies. So it's great that they're calling this out, and credit to them. And they should ban politicians from owning stocks, absolutely. But don't get it twisted. The worst form of corruption, because it's more pervasive and there's more money involved in it, is campaign contributions. Now, unfortunately, the Supreme Court ruled that basically money equals free speech in a number of court decisions over the years. And so whatever rules there are very lax. And so you would need a constitutional amendment to give us public elections, clean elections. And what that means is instead of private funding of elections, you have public funding. So each candidate is allocated a certain amount, and then that's the money they could use to campaign. Or you give the American people a $100 or $200 voucher or whatever, and they get to spend it on whatever politicians they want. That's the idea of a clean election. Do you get the private money out of the system so they actually start representing the people? We can't have that unless and until we have a constitutional amendment. That's one massive problem. But there is a way around all this corruption, but short of taking on the monumental task of a constitutional convention to get the money out of the system. You can have a direct democracy law at a federal level, which allows us, those direct ballot initiatives in the states. So, like, for example, here in New York, years ago, we voted on, should upstate New York be allowed to have casinos? They're lagging economically. They don't have a lot of jobs there. If the voters approve a casino there, then they'll have a casino there. That was one of the direct ballot initiatives. There's been a number, and California has a lot of them. A lot of states have a lot of direct ballot initiatives. Even some conservative states have direct ballot initiatives. The idea of a federal direct ballot initiative law, like a federal direct democracy law, could be that when you go vote for president every 4 years, you also get hit with 5 issues you vote directly on. Imagine all of us, you go vote for president, and then also, as you're voting for president, should we raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour? By the way, I bet you would see participation in our democracy massively increase if people got to vote directly on the issues. Should we end the war in Iraq? Should we have a $15 minimum wage? Should we have a universal healthcare system? And my guess is no matter who wins, Democrat or Republican, usually 80% of the time, the better position wins for the direct ballot initiatives. And sometimes even with massive propaganda on the wrong side, the right side wins. Now, look, about 20% of the time it doesn't. Sometimes the propaganda wins out. But 80-20 is a much better split than what we have right now, which is 95-5. 95% of the time the wrong position wins, 5% of the time the right position wins. 80% on the right side of it, I'll take it. So that's what we need to do. But look, corporate media turning on Nancy Pelosi is not something I saw coming, but what she said was so egregious, even they couldn't handle it. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.